Hello, 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 everybody. We are going to have an awesome discussion right now on, I think, one of the most important topics of our time in the industry. So if folks want to come over here, I'll introduce the panel and the topic in a second.
Don't we have cocaine here, Jack? Everyone?
No,
Yeah.
everybody's very alive, though. Yeah, no, exactly. So my name is Jack Bamberger. I'm the Chief Commercial Officer at Amobee, and this actually might be my highlight of the week because I'm bringing together three of my dearest friends in the industry to have a talk about, I think, something that is incredibly timely and important. And it actually is an amazing halo to what we're doing here in Cannes as well, in terms of a word that we're going to talk a little bit about, which is purpose. Today's topic is about values-based planning and buying. And we as marketers, as agencies, as industry leaders talk often about this concept of a brand equity pyramid. And what does that mean in terms of how it guides brand marketing, media decisions, values, and more. But we are absolutely living in a bonkers time right now. And the questions that I want to talk about relate to what are we doing, what are we not doing, what are we thinking about, how are we practicing that? Because when you think about, and this is just a small little list of topics, you know, if you think about the bifurcated news and political environment, or the fact that, you know, for 2+ years we've been dealing with a pandemic, maybe you now call it an endemic. I think we all need a hug all the time. And I think that that's an amazing story around leadership, but also what do brands do in this time when I think emotionally people are desperately looking for hugs. Social injustice, abortion rights, trans rights, the roller coaster stock market, supply chain issues, inflation, high gas prices, DEI, racial challenges around the globe, Gen Z millennials caring about the role in society, and I could keep going.
What could go wrong?
What can go wrong?
Stop?
Exactly. So it's crazy town, but that's also both an opportunity and a challenge. So why we're here is to talk about what the heck that means, and I have an amazing group here with me. So first to my left, Traci Alford is the Global Chief Executive Officer and President of Effie Worldwide. And the Effie's, not just proudly, I am a board member, but more importantly, I love the fact that the mission is all focused on marketing effectiveness. And Traci, who's been CEO of the Effies for 5+ years, also worked in marketing roles in Shell, Cadbury, Dr. Pepper, 7-Up, and more. To her left is my dear friend Jim Stengel, who is the former Procter & Gamble Global Marketing Officer, now owner of the Jim Stengel Company, also hosts what's known as the CMO podcast. And if you don't listen to that, make sure to subscribe. And I'm not saying it just because Jim's there. The content is always fresh and relevant and engaging. So welcome, Jim.
It explains the outfit too, right? You want to say that.
Well, I'll let you explain that. Exactly. We'll come back to that. And then my dear friend, Adam Gerhart, who is the Global Chief Executive Officer of Mindshare, part of Group M and WPP. He's been there 17.5 years, leads an organization globally of over 10,000 people. And what I love about this group is we've got Traci focusing on marketing effectiveness, Jim guiding marketers and agencies and so many types of companies around what success looks like, and Adam, Mike now, here we are, a practitioner who's guiding a large team globally on how do we make sense of all this. The other thing is, Mindshare focuses on accelerating good growth. Jim talks a lot about purpose, path to growth, and I just think that this is going to be a fun conversation. So why don't we jump into this, I think, important topic. The first thing that's on my mind is let's start with the brand equity pyramid. And if you look at that list that I was talking about, that are all the challenges that are going on in the world, and not just our industry, it's, I'm sure, given brands, or it should be given brands, time to pause, rethink, reflect about what they might have had as their brand equity pyramid in the past, Are they doing it right? Not right? Are they practicing it? How's it evolving? Changing it? Is it changed? Working? Not working? And what's the practice of this today? So I don't know if we want to jump into that pool and give some thoughts, whoever wants to join in first. But there's a lot of paths you could go. But love to hear some perspective on that.
Maybe I'll jump in because I think I come from a company many years ago, P&G, which I think sort of invented it, or at least was one of the companies that pioneered that way to think about your brand, to think about who you're serving, what are you offering, how do you bring it to life. And yes, it has evolved. And I do think the CMOs around the world are deeply engaged in that. I teach at the Kellogg School, and I recently did a class of about 40 CMOs, and we talked about how the who, the why, the what, and the how are all changing. And if you thought in the old days your who was the people who are likely to buy your product, you better be thinking about that and the underserved, underrepresented, and your employees as a who. And I could go down the why, the what, and the how similarly in how they've shifted. And the ones that are embracing that and talking to their people and shifting are the ones that are going to market with things that are working. And you probably can prove that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, when I think about that, there's many brands that come to mind. First one would be Dove, Unilever product, but I look at its trajectory.
Adam knows a little about that
Thanks.
brand.
Good plug.
Exactly. I mean, it was the first about, to be very strong in body representation for women. And it's gone on a journey, and it hasn't been straight by any means. There's been some times where it has been less great, but I look at some of the work that they're doing now around bullying, around social media with mums and daughters. I mean, that's really exceptional work. So I think, they're doing some great work. Mastercard is another fantastic example that comes to mind
Not
as
us.
well.
Keep going.
In terms of, in terms of, transgender, we saw this. I saw a film this morning that I hadn't seen, which was about a blind lady and cutting the card. And so I think it's absolutely not easy, but we see some great brands who've continued to grow, who's got amazing share, that are incredibly effective, and they've done it right.
Yeah. We have a question, then I'll repeat it.
So,
Here, should I bring my mic down?
Oh, it's going to be recorded.
But you talk about how Dove has done great things now with social and bullying and
yes.
And so my question would be, do they support social media platforms with their money, or are they trying to do something to impact the social platforms?
Or Adam, do you want
I
to
love
take
that.
that?
Yes. Yeah, I'll
Because
take it.
Adam
I'll take it.
globally leads the Unilever business, so
Yeah.
he might have some perspective.
Yeah, it's both is the answer. They fundamentally believe they should be investing, obviously, not only where their consumers are, but where platforms support their own values and their own agenda. You take something like responsible journalism. It's something that they lean very heavily into, and we did work with them to move money out of platforms that were, didn't have enough parameters and safeguards in place to actually support journalism that they believed was diverse, equitable, and safe. So I think more and more, to segue those two thoughts, brand health pyramids are absolutely critical, but they're much more fluid, they are much more dynamic, and you can't set and forget. Where you put your money right now has a massive impact on how quickly they are moving because of news cycles, because of platforms. And so I think it has to be both. Otherwise, you end up in a situation where what you are doing is disingenuous, and consumers call you out on it more than ever.
Adam, I have a question for you. So, as somebody on the panel who's representing the agency world, what are brand marketers getting right and wrong, in your opinion? Or what is it that they should be doing more of? Maybe that's a different question as well, in terms of how they're thinking about what they were doing from a brand equity pyramid standpoint versus today. Any sort of learnings that you've sort of unpacked?
I think it's probably a little bit more broad than brand equity, but the biggest thing that we're seeing right now is every client, every brand, every company is struggling with what was the bifurcation between doing good and purpose and business outcomes. They were seen as being diametrically opposed for way too long, where you couldn't do both. There's enough evidence out there and enough brands and enough case studies and empirical bodies of work that are proving actually that not only should they work together, they have to work together. Consumers are demanding it and they're expecting it, but also it's an accelerant of business more than ever. And so I think, brand health has a huge role to play in that, but you have to live the values, and they have to come through all the way in your communications.
Yeah, no, they definitely need to go all the way through the value chain. We primarily measure the top. So to answer your question, I don't have any data behind it. But in terms of just, we have two types of categories. One, we have which are pure purpose-driven, which are profit and non-profit, and they've grown by 50% in terms of the... Hello. Yep. More interesting is the fact that mainstream brands who have P&Ls, have responsibilities financially, the growth in that has been around 17% of our gold cases, which is so I think that verging of that too is it's happening and it's here.
I think it might be interesting. The industry seems to be having a bit of a backlash on purpose. There's dialogue about it. We lost focus on other things to drive the business. And I think there's such a flaw in that thinking. Purpose is about driving the business in the right way and for a sustained period of time. And the data suggests that companies and people and brands who do that do better than the competitive set and attract better talent and have bigger margins.
Yeah. I think what we're seeing is there was a moment of reckoning where brands and businesses were being called out for not standing for anything. They overswung, and the pendulum went so far that we're in a period now of purpose fatigue. And people are tired of it, but it's because it isn't in service of them and all of the constituents that they serve. The best purpose-driven campaigns and work should actually satiate every constituent's needs in the value chain. It should be good for the brand, it should be good for the consumer, it should be good for society, planet. And there are enough pieces of work and examples of that where you can do all of those all at once without compromising.
And I think the other element of that is staff. Don't ever underestimate your people. If you look at the
100%.
core nucleus of a brand, it comes from inside. And that piece about being genuine, it'll be picked apart in a heartbeat if it doesn't come from the right place.
We talk about having 5 constituents that we have to serve when we drive good growth for our clients, and it isn't just growth and it isn't just good. It's good growth for a reason. But we talk about being good for the clients and the brands that we serve, the agency and our people. We talk about the world around us. We talk about society, and we talk about the industry itself. And all of those can be done all at once.
Jim, you're going to teach later this week a CMO accelerator course for 55 CMOs around the world. I'm curious, I think we're going into an interesting economic world in the second half of this year. And of what we were just talking about, anything that you're going to talk about differently because of the world that we are in now that is part of your curriculum? Just curious if there's anything that is going to be a little different.
Well, we survey everyone coming to see what their burning issues are. And so we pivot off of that for the group discussions we have on peer-to-peer learning and trying to solve problems together. I think it just does reflect this, what did Jamie Dimon call it, the hurricane coming of all recessions, something of that. So
I don't really want to hear that.
So yes, it is affecting what we talk about, Jack, but I think in many ways it's, when times get tough, people go to companies that are about solutions and about help and are about value. And we learned a lot during COVID about being of service to people and stepping up with our organizations, with our consumers, with our customers, offering greater value, maybe shifting our product mix a bit. And all that's going to be, we can't lose those lessons.
I think that's critical. And I'm worried that people were going to just literally focus on bottom line versus what the consumer really does need.
And I hope we consider, we were talking to Angela Ahrens on Saturday night, and we talked about this issue, and she said, I just hope we don't go to the people first, which we seem to always do. There's other places we can get efficiencies, other places we can figure out ways to get through this. There's other communication we can have to our shareholders. But, bringing people back and retraining and re-getting them started, that's a big expense. We don't fully understand that. It takes time. Your business typically suffers. I just hope we go into this with the empathy we had during COVID for our employees and our consumers and customers and make the right choices for the long term.
I think a really good proof point to that we've been tracking for a little while now. I mean, And JP Morgan just put out some research around this, which is that companies with a higher ESG factor actually have much more resilience in moments of downturn. And if you use that as a barometer of what may be coming, I think Jim's absolutely right that we're in a position where actually those companies can weather the storm without having to compromise, employees and people.
And I think the other thing linked to that coming out of COVID was purpose does not always need to be a downer. So if I look at some of the work that's starting to come out now, it's joyful, it's very human. And I just think, we can do good things, but they can be also fun and they can be celebratory. And I think that's a really interesting dynamic as well. It's like, let's do good things, but have a good time doing them.
Actually, one interesting, the number one issue that our survey came back with was that they say this tension between performance marketing and brand marketing, and the trends of performance marketing going up and spending, brand marketing going, that's their number one issue. Yeah. That's interesting going into the recession that they're thinking about that, which I think is healthy.
I'd love to hear the perspective of the two people on the side of you on that topic. Any thoughts?
Well, if you look at the data, performance is fine for the short term, it's not fine for the long term. And I think that the dilemma we have here is when you come back to people, the longevity of the leadership and how long they're in and what they're driven to do. But if you can step back from that and you have the resilience to kind of manage the long term and the short term and put time aside to that, and I think it's a lot to do with talent. We have a lot of specialised talent that are driven on the day-to-day basis. And I think the blend of strategic talent and very short-term marketing talent, I think is contributing to that as well.
And Adam, I bet you could get ping-ponged in your team every day on that question. And I'm sure between a CMO and a CFO and a marketer, you're probably just a punching bag. Or talk to me.
No, you're entirely right. Not that I'm a punching bag, but
I don't want you to be.
Yeah, I couldn't hack it. Look at me. I think this is one of the biggest challenges that they are struggling with because it's actually an artificial barrier. There is no longer a divide between performance and brand, and yet it's been created in institutions all around the world because there are different KPIs within an organization. If you had an organization that was all working towards one singular objective with the same time horizon, with the same strategic goals, actually the ability to break down brand and performance becomes much easier. And you see one as demand generation and the other one as demand conversion. And they start to create a nucleus together. But the way that they've been constructed, because of differing agendas, different stakeholders, different budgets, different bosses, that has created a divide that has only grown. And my concern, to bring it full circle, is that in times like this, where we're heading into arguably a recession in many parts of the world, it's only going to exacerbate. So we have to be really careful that we focus on how we keep those two worlds closely connected.
So, Traci, I know you mentioned Dove, and obviously Adam went down that path as well. Adam, any other examples that you think of brands that are doing it right? I just think about the opportunity for, changing social minds in this time of all of these issues that we're dealing with.
Yeah. So I know we always use Dove as the barometer of kind of purpose and that sort of thing, but actually I'm amazingly proud of how they've been able to constantly reimagine what that looks like for them and the idea of real beauty and self-esteem and those sorts of things. You look at the work that's shortlisted for Titanium and that sort of thing. Reverse selfie. You look at the Crown Act, which is driving a change agenda against hair discrimination that's been passed in many states across the U.S. and now they're looking for it to be adopted nationally. Those are genuine and they're meaningful, but I think what separates purpose for me, or the best definition of purpose that I think we're creating now, that any brand will emulate, is it's the difference between making the brand and the product the hero and people and consumers the hero. The brands that are able to actually empower consumers to drive change and enable them to enact goodness or whatever the case is, those are the brands that are truly purpose-driven as opposed to what can arguably be seen as purpose washing these days.
Well, I think that, I'll come back to you, Jim, hang on a second. But I think about that in terms of like media decisions as well. Like how do you, there's been certainly a lot of energy around wanting to support minority initiatives in media, but how do you make sure that's strategically done versus tactically done in a meaningful way?
So, first of all, I think, sorry, I'm monopolizing this. I think the old metrics of CPM and antiquated ways of measuring performance or savings have been the root cause, quite honestly, in a lot of what's happening in the media ecosystem at the moment. We have to move towards effectiveness and impact, as we were talking about earlier, as opposed to just how much did you save or how much cost did you avoid. I think if we can start to do that, it changes the dynamics of things. And so some of the work that we're most proud of is take something like we created an LGBTQ private marketplace or a responsible journalism marketplace that is intentionally driving investment into those underrepresented voices and publishers. And so we've been able to turn things on its head a little bit. And Sky was the first one, Sky Vodka. They were one of our clients that leaned into the LGBTQ PMP really heavily, but it's only because they had a heritage there. Otherwise, it would have come across as duplicitous. And so they're pulling their values all the way through into their media buys and into the ecosystem that supports marketing.
Jim, another example?
No, I was just thinking, I just did 3 podcasts before I came here, and that's why I'm dressed. I interviewed the Sesame Workshop CMOs. That's why I'm dressed as Cookie Monster. Anyway.
And look at his shoes, just saying.
I interviewed the Steph Curry Nines. I interviewed Ford, Susie at Ford, and Mel at LinkedIn, and Samantha at Sesame. All three brands talked about the clarity of their purpose, the engagement with employees and stakeholders. Everyone's aligned behind it, and their trends are really good. Ford is a new company now since deciding that they were going to help save the world through electrification and setting clear goals. So there are examples that we use Dove a lot, which is great. It is a good one, and it's over time. But there are so many more stories. If it's a great purpose and meets the criteria and people see it in their daily work, things are going to be great for that company. It's that simple.
Exactly. I mean, I mentioned Mastercard before, the campaign Street with No Name. If you wind back 30 years ago, they were number 3rd in the marketplace, and now they're market leader. I mean, again, that combination and that, just that genuineness. I mean, another classic, always mentioned, but Nike, there was periods where they lost their way and they didn't put the athlete front and center, and they've done that, and look what they've done, with Crazy Dreams. I just think, there's a lot of big brands, but as you say, there's a lot of, small local brands that we probably don't even see in our day-to-day who are really doing some great things and will be the future.
If there's a wish for what marketers need to be doing differently, or Adam, your clients, or maybe even your team differently to move what we just talked about further forward in terms of connecting all these dots as we're walking into more challenging times, but also focusing, I think, on purpose, starting from the beginning. Any thoughts, Traci?
I mean, I think my observation is, COVID's been tough on us as an industry, and we need to come together creatively. I mean, I just think if we're really going to break through this, we've got, I see amazing people all the time, incredibly talented, and it doesn't matter whether they're creative side, media side, data analysts, strategy people, all these amazing people, and I just think we need to come together and be significantly more creative in how we tackle our solutions, but incredibly methodical at the same time. So I think that wonderful combination of, creativity and science, but I just think, fundamentally, we'll only be able to do that with diversity, and I mean genuine diversity. And diversity is not always what you see either. Diversity comes in many shapes and forms, so I think diversity is key.
Amen.
I mean, I use a kind of a tactical one. Anyone see Ryan Roslansky's talk in the Palais yesterday? The LinkedIn CEO. Watch it. It's a very dramatic rallying cry for bringing more creativity to B2B. B2B has a lot of small companies that have big ideas that can help change this world, and they're not good at getting their promise clear and communicated. And the creative community has kind of ignored it. So let's set our ambitions higher as clients, fabulous briefs, bring people together, and let's not forget B2B.
I think for me, and this may sound a bit cliche, but the real ability to suspend our agendas moving forward. As we talk about brand and performance, short-term versus long-term, creative versus media, you name it. All of those are driven by agendas. Many cases because of ambitions that are, goals that are set and that sort of thing. But if we can genuinely start to work in a much more harmonious ecosystem, I think it's going to create a level of work that is better, but also a business impact that, again, is good for everyone in the entire ecosystem.
So believe it or not, that was 30 minutes. It goes quick.
Jack, we're from the same hometown in Pennsylvania.
I know
We just
that.
discovered that.
I knew that before, you two met.
He doesn't have cookie socks
We
on.
could have done 30 minutes on that.
Yeah, we could, yeah. Well,
Oh, Pam has a question. Yeah, hang on. 35.
Adam, you talked about how you've created an LGBTQ marketplace and a misinformation, a news
Yep.
marketplace. And so my question is the CFO aligned with the CMO on kind of what these values can bring, and are they willing to potentially pay an increased cost for them? Hopefully the long-term outcomes are as the same or better, but there's probably a short-term cost differentiation.
You're 100% right, and I think that goes back to the ability to suspend agendas, because there is a premium in some instance to be paid for it. But interestingly, through all of the work that we've done, every single campaign that we've run through our PMP, whether it's responsible journalism, LGBTQ, we have a Black creators PMP, every single piece of work that we put through that, every single campaign has not only driven an uplift in terms of brand health metrics, but also short-term sales. And I think when you start to be able to show those types of tangible examples of success, then actually you can bring the CFO and the CMO to the same table with a common agenda to change the game moving forward. So we need to see more of that. We need to see more of it at scale, though.
Adam, Jim, Tracy, thank you.
thank you, Jack.
Thanks,
Have a
Jack.
Thank you, Jack.
Well done,
Jack.
Jack.
Thank you.
On time for the
All
first
good.
time.
No, we didn't. Welcome to Friends Getting Together.
Thanks.
Okay, have a good day.